We're less than 24 hours out from the terrorist attack in Paris against the offices of Charlie Hebdo, in which 12 were killed. 2 police officers, 4 cartoonists, and 6 others, including visiting guest editors, receptionists, and others who just happened to be in the building. The attackers were able to get away. They were able to hijack a car and flee the area. And they are still being tracked down, although two of them are still being tracked down. One, Mourad Hamid, turned himself in early this morning to French police officers. 18 years old, yes.
Yeah.
Now, many of his classmates said that he was in school at the time of the attack, so they're proclaiming his innocence. But the other 2, Sharif Kouachi and Saeed Kouachi, are still being tracked down. They were cited earlier today after having, at gunpoint, got a refueling of their vehicle. It was believed at that point that they were heading towards Paris. The French police scrambled to block all of the entrances to Paris. However, it seems like the brothers were able to ditch the car and then proceeded on foot through the woods. And so now there's a 10 by 12 mile area that is being searched by sort of the Paris equivalent of special forces. It's known as Crépy-en-Valois. They have not yet been found as we're live airing this, but there is a relatively small area geographically that is being searched for these 2 remaining brothers. And we also know that in addition, 7 others have been arrested, known associates of the brothers and family members, more than likely being brought in for questioning to try to track down where they might be hiding. But it's a difficult situation. We have reactions from the media that we're going to talk about. We have reactions from Islamic leaders from around the world that we're going to discuss, but I do want your reactions.
Well, first off, I mean, let's just start with the fact that they're still on the run. I think is amazing in the day and age that we live in, with the amount of cameras everywhere, and
especially in Europe. Europe has many more cameras.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
So with the amount of cameras, the amount of people that are paying attention is obviously the entire country. It's just incredible that they're still on the loose. That in a weird way, that's the least of the important things going on right now, as long as they don't do anything else. But it's just incredible to me.
Yeah. Thankfully, when they sort of, I guess, they hijacked the vehicle and then at gunpoint got the refueling, no additional violence then. Although you have to worry and imagine that when the police finally do track them down, as we expect that they will be able to, since we have an ID apparently of what they actually look like, and they have people that know them who are going to be able to provide some information, there's the possibility of violence at that point.
Right.
And so that's a very real fear, I think.
They'll get them. I imagine that the French police know what they're doing, and that eventually, remember it took us quite some time to catch Tim McVeigh, and we're still in essentially that era.
And the Boston Marathon bombers, it took a little while to track them down as well.
It takes time. The Boston Marathon bombers, took until the next day. It's essentially the same situation.
Right. Most likely this ends with more violence, though, right? Like, these guys aren't coming in peacefully. Do you think?
No, only because you'd think that the third suspect turned himself in, but if it turns out that he's not a suspect and he went in to make it clear that he wasn't, maybe that's it. I don't know. There obviously, we saw the video, there were 3 people.
Yeah.
So maybe they have the wrong guy, I don't know. But these guys, they'll get them. They're not trained professionals, and they'll find them.
Yeah, I know that I'm basically echoing Dave's point, but it is difficult to imagine in the modern era after we grew up on movies like Enemy of the State, like you imagine they have the satellites. And Obama came out yesterday and he said whatever resources are needed to try to track these guys down, we're going to provide them to the French police, the French government. And you just imagine, like, this is not like the center of Boston. Like, they're traveling across France now from one city to another. We know what their vehicle is, or at least we had an idea of what their vehicle was. The inability to quickly track it down is somewhat hard to fathom.
I don't think so.
I guess there's a lot of people.
But also, don't fall into the life is 24 trap. I mean, there aren't drones overhead that can instantly find the vehicle. We don't have that. As paranoid as we're getting, and as worrisome as the new sort of omnipresent state that can view everything is. We're not there yet. So it's police work. Now that said, you get every cop in France on one task. You're going to find them.
Right. Yeah. Now, as people that are generally against their surveillance state, I guess we can take a little silver lining in that they haven't found them, because I guess maybe they're not that great at it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, now a couple of other facts we do have to update you on. As we reported yesterday, there were absolutely massive rallies of hundreds of thousands of people, both throughout France and in other European cities. Those continue through till today. And we have also received some reports, although I have not been able to find many details, about what are considered to be sort of strike-back attacks against mosques in France. So some justifiably outraged French citizens are unfortunately taking it upon themselves to try to get some sort of vigilante justice for what happened, although obviously the mosques that they're attacking have absolutely no link to the attackers. You can't really justify the emotional reaction of those sorts of people. Now, we do know a little bit more about the two brothers who are currently being tracked down. They are both French nationals. They were born in France. They grew up in France, have spent a little bit of time outside of the country in Syria, multiple run-ins with the law as far back as 2005. We've also, of course, received reports that at least one, Sharif, said that he was, I guess, initially radicalized, I suppose, because of what he saw in terms of the torture that was being persecuted against Iraqis in Iraq by American forces. Who knows what percentage of his radicalization could be traced back to that, but of course it is noteworthy, I suppose.
But since he got out of prison, though, his lawyer said today that he wasn't that radical, you know, and he did things. What's that great line? He drank, smoked pot, slept with his girlfriend, and delivered pizzas for a living.
Yeah. Well, we have to bear in mind that's actually from a 2005 interview, so it's possible that he's developed somewhat in the interim. And we do know that they've tried to travel to the area at one point back then. He was stopped. But they have been affiliated with an organization that was working to ferry fighters over to Syria and Iraq. We don't know exactly what their affiliation is yet. It's possible that once they interview some of the family members and known associates, we'll have more direct information, but now there is a degree of speculation. Born
to Algerian immigrant parents, the younger kid, Sharif, raised in foster care, and then at some point got out of foster care, went to live with his brother, who we don't know where he was raised, but presumably if one was raised in foster care, the other was as well, or raised by the state, or who knows. But it's whatever it is, when we get that whole story, one gets the impression it's going to be a very depressing story.
I'm feeling this feels very personal to me for what we do.
Yeah.
Are you guys feeling that too? Like this really, like everything that we do here, you know what I mean? It could have just as easily been us. You know what I mean? Like really, we're out there talking about shit that people don't like. And this is a different attack on the West, I think, than some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can feel personal. I mean, I don't share the degree, maybe because they're French and whatever reason that we disassociate. But it's incredibly moving. No, these are people who tried to make a difference and talked about the issues of the day and did it in their own particular way, which reasonable people think they went too far, too. You know, nobody thinks that this was the end, and we'll get to that, because nobody thinks this was an appropriate response in any way, even if many of those people feel the need.
Possibly Donahue.
In condemning the attack, many still felt the need to say, even though what they did was horrible.
Even though what Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah.
I don't believe, I mean, I think part of the hope, I imagine that the sort of underlying philosophy of that organization and others online who routinely put forth drawings of the Prophet Muhammad and things like that, or that if they see it happening enough, eventually they'll get over it.
Yeah, there's also...
It's like, you know, somebody on a nude beach for the first time. Eventually you've seen a lot of boobs and you move on.
Yeah.
But for some reason it seems like some extreme religious zealots on the Islamic side, it's just...
Maybe Dave moves on. I'm just
perhaps
saying.
But eventually there should be a desensitization, and it doesn't seem to be happening. And I think that some people are going to perhaps justifiably sort of back off because of the fear, as you said. You know, we have conversations about whether we should show a certain thing or cover a certain topic, because there are domestic terrorists in America as well who will target liberal organizations. We've seen that. Even in California specifically, we've seen that. But then there are others who are going to see this and they're going to say, you know what, we need to double down. We need to put more cartoons forth. We need to force this issue. We need to drag these people into this millennium.
I mean, I'm definitely on the second part of that. I definitely agree with the latter half. I mean, you can't let people dictate what you're going to do as a free society. You know what I mean? There are a gajillion covers that they did with all kinds of Jewish stereotypes, blah, blah, blah. So what? So
right. Catholic,
and Catholic.
Buddhist.
They're an equal opportunity offender. It's like Family Guy. You know what I mean?
The still living employees of Charlie Hebdo they're not backing off. In fact, they're not only putting forth a new issue next week. It is going to be by far their largest and most widely spread issue ever. Normally, as I said, they have a circulation of about 30,000. But thanks to a massive donation by Google of over 250,000 euros, that is going to be a circulation of 1 million for the next the next edition of Charlie Hebdo. I imagine it's going to be spread all around the world. We can sort of debate whether or not we think that's an appropriate response or a dangerous response, but that's the way that Google and the cartoon
I think
proceeding.
I think it's the right response. I don't think there's no question it's the right response. It's what I would do. I just, at the same time, I would also think, I wish these people weren't dead, and if I could go back.
I wish that as well.
Yeah, of course.
But then if I could go back and do something differently, I probably would, because there's,
I don't know that they would. Well, look, we can't speak
I don't know.
for all 12 of them, of course, and it would be.
I'm speaking for
They're
myself.
saying that they wouldn't.
Right. I mean, there's the quote from the editor, which, what did he say? That I'd rather die on my back than live on my knees or something.
Rather die on my feet than live on my knees.
I understand, but I get that for the editors, except not for the other people.
For
who
sure,
weren't-
for sure. But
that's all.
I mean, that argument, there's no way of knowing what the secretary felt. Of course, she would rather be alive, and everyone would rather her be alive. So was it worth it? I mean, this is a battle of civilizations, I guess.
It's just so fucking dumb.
Yeah.
It's just so dumb.
Yeah.
It is almost impossible to understand.
Yeah, right. It's fucking cartoons. Like, you dumb motherfuckers. It's a cartoon.
But we live in a weird world. I don't understand it. Like, a much smaller version, if you don't like a channel on YouTube and you unsubscribe, going in and writing a comment, I don't even understand that response. Obviously, killing people is about 1 million times worse, but people, they're not like us, or the people like you, they're not like you. They are insane, and the world is filled with enough of those people.
Right, and if we're going to say that it's fucking dumb, which it obviously is, then it's incumbent on us to show the images in the context with which they were made. You know what I mean? Otherwise, the next group, whatever the next group is, forget Muslims, whatever the next group is, that doesn't want to be offended by something will threaten violence, and then we won't talk about that either. It just doesn't end. It simply will not end, and that's why I think this is time for the world to just kind of wake up. I don't know what the response is, and I don't want to be too, give too much hyperbole here, but.
I mean, there's no way. The problem is there's no really way. The world's awake. That's the problem. Is that it doesn't take much. We're talking about 3 guys. And maybe they had some help, it'll turn out. Maybe there are 11 guys. But if you're willing to die, as always, for your cause, whatever it is, then if you have access to the weaponry, you can do tremendous damage.
Yeah.
And the damage that you do, killing 12 people, that's damaging all by itself. But the damage to our psyche is devastating.
Yeah, and by the way, the damage that they're going to do to their own community, to the Muslim community.
Yeah,
in
because
France.
we're already going to get to
that.
We're going to get to that reaction. But let me read one thing from Slate, which is interesting, because it's worth remembering that and I'm going to mess this up, so I apologize. The Hadith, which is sort of the teachings of the Quran, and that sort of bans the depictions of Muhammad. But the Quran got nothing on it. Nothing. Not mentioned. Doesn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
Here I'll read directly from Slate. Quran does not explicitly ban depictions of Muhammad, certainly does not call for violence against those who display such images, even in a mocking or offensive way.
Yeah.
The Hadith does ban images of Muhammad, the relatives of Muhammad, Allah, and all the major prophets, but as Reza Aslan noted in 2006, such depictions have existed in certain sects of the religion for years without causing mass violence. So just remember, as we have debates here about the wacky, dumb interpretations of the Bible, these guys are interpreting the Quran in a nuts way. It's not there. It's not
right,
in
and
it.
also someone should, I know they don't care about this, but someone should remind them that our laws and the laws of France are not based on the Quran or any other holy book. That's an important piece of this, you know?
Yeah. Yes, and we have to bear in mind that there are strikingly different schools of thought, schools of philosophy in Islam, dating back literally since the beginning of Islam.
The Quran
some of which prioritize
and very quick, the
one writing versus
Quran
another.
does call for condemnation, Slate says, of speech and actions that insult Allah, but then specifically says, but your retaliation cannot be violent. So I mean, that's a specific thing from the Quran.
And the Ten Commandments say, "Thou shalt not kill."
That's right.
But we're pretty much okay with it, the Christians in America at least.